First blood.
Joint operations.
Weapons free, people. Make some hate on.
Ice the sharpshooter.
Nice try, buddy.
Not looking good. I hope you got a second wind or something.
Hostile UAV established overhead.
Oh shit. You bad. Let me run down on you and you got a UAV up? That's horrible. Ah! Fuck!
Oh shit. I hope you're ready for a switch up. Inhalation.
Securing Zone D.
Hold zones, get stoned. Man, I love this job.
Securing Delta. We're losing Charlie. Delta secure. We lost Charlie.
Check off. We need watchdog helo close air now.
Losing D. Lock it down, Bravo.
They own all the zones. I hope you have a plan.
Lock it down, Charlie.
Oh, grenade.
We control Zone C. Taking D. Bravo zone secure. They're taking C. Lost C. We're losing Delta.
Scout post available.
Enemy UAV inbound. Losing D. Enemy napalm strike incoming. Losing B. Securing Charlie. Bravo lost.
Simtex, front.
We're losing Delta. Charlie secured.
Frag going out.
Losing D.
Heads up. Things are about to get weird.
Hostile UAV established overhead. Mission Bravo underway. We've lost Delta.
Shit, they took the lead. Don't let them walk
Trash.
all over you. Come on. Oh, score streak. Operator establishing score streak.
Breaking out rocket launcher.
It's like nobody ever shoots anything down.
Enemy UAV inbound.
Tracking enemy target. Target caught my smoke. Tossing frag.
Boy, stop.
Airdrop detected.
Lockdown.
Yeah, I don't. You can't see. I don't like it, bro. When I don't
Yeah,
like it.
that's what I'm talking about.
It's cool, but I don't like it, bro. It's just the board and how it is can cause you to get killed because you can't see. No, I'm good on that, bro.
Oh, not looking good. I hope you got a second wind or something. Shit, they took the lead. Don't let them walk all over you. Come on.
Bruh, no way.
So to the degree I have implicit biases, I think we all do. I think that's partly the point. Is
everyone's a racist, whether they know it or not.
And I would say that everyone might have implicit biases, and I don't know what.
So what's the difference between bias and prejudice?
I think there can be a lot of overlap in those things. It depends, I think, on the context.
So meaning in court, and Mr. Ritz will more than likely be taken off this case because of these particular allegations. So did that happen?
And I believe it was in case I needed to be a witness. But those allegations.
This is what your supervisor said in open court. I'm not quoting you now, private letter. I'm quoting you something from open court.
Dude,
she said you were removed from the case because of the allegations, which she says were very serious. Now, you've represented this committee. You knew nothing about all of this.
In your 2023 U.S. Attorney Investiture speech, you highlighted the challenges you believe America faces and what justice means. You said, quote, "We're experiencing a long overdue reckoning with racism in the criminal justice system." Mr. Ritz, what part of the criminal justice system needs a long overdue reckoning?
Senator, what I was describing were a number of things that have happened in recent years in this country that framed, I would say, in some ways, the work that we do in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Is the American justice system systematically racist?
That is not a sentiment that I hold. To the degree there is a definition of what being systematically racist means, I understand some individuals have pointed to disparities, sentencing and that type of thing, but that's not a view that I have.
So that's not a view that you have. That was your testimony. Well, you also said, quote, "There cannot be one rule of law for people who look like me and another for people of color." That sure sounds like the view you just said you didn't have. Do you believe that's our system, that our justice system has one rule of law for people that look like you and a different rule of law for people of color?
No, what I said is that absolutely we cannot have one rule of law for people who look like me and another for people of color. We cannot have one rule of law for the powerless and another for the... There's just one rule of law. That's what I said.
You also said, when asked if the criminal justice system is systematically racist, you said, quote, "There are structural barriers and disparate outcomes that communities of color experience in our society, separate and apart from any individual's views or intentions." Now, that again seems to be saying the same thing that you're saying you weren't saying. I'm just trying to understand what your views are.
And Senator, that was my attempt in that written question to grapple with, again, what was being asked by systematic racism. I understand some have pointed to structural barriers and disparate outcomes.
So what are the barriers and outcomes you're referring to?
I can think of one prominent example that I've had some experience with, which is the disparity in cocaine sentencing between crack sentencing and powder sentencing. This body has addressed those disparities on multiple occasions, and that has been, as I understand it, something that people have addressed as a result of disparity.
Okay. You also said in responses to questions for the record that, as the Attorney General has explained, everyone has implicit biases. So what are your implicit biases?
Senator, I understand implicit bias to refer to unconscious bias that exists below the level of consciousness, and so to the degree I have implicit biases, I think we all do. I think that's partly the point. Is
so everyone's a racist, whether they know it or not?
And I would say that everyone might have implicit biases, and I don't know what.
So what's the difference between bias and prejudice?
I think there can be a lot of overlap in those things. It depends, I think, on the context.
So you're saying everyone is prejudiced?
That's not what I said, Senator.
You just said everyone has implicit biases, and you said that bias and prejudice, I think your words were, there's a lot of overlap.
I think that's right, and I understand implicit bias, and I'm not an expert on the subject, to refer to a set of biases that may exist beyond under a conscious level.
So, since you talk about these implicit bias issues, have you taken a so-called implicit bias test?
We received training that was put on during the last administration in our office on implicit bias. I attended that training in our office.
And what did you take a test?
I don't believe there was a test associated with that, Senator.
Okay, you also said, quote, "But you should know that for justice, for me, is about more than putting people in prison. For me, it's also about who votes and how hard it is to cast that vote. It's about where pipelines or bus routes go. Justice is about whether people in all zip codes can get a loan, whether women have access to health care." That's an interesting statement, and in reading it, what's striking is that that's de-emphasizing the core role of a U.S. attorney. The last I checked, a U.S. attorney is not in the policy business of deciding where pipelines go. That's the role of environmental activists and left-wing activists, but is not supposed to be a U.S. attorney. Why was your focus elsewhere?
Senator, and the very next thing I said was that those are not issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the U.S. Attorney's Office, where we are primarily focused on enforcing criminal laws. I was seeking to place justice as a broad concept at the center of, to place our work within justice as a broad concept.
So do you agree that Memphis is one of the most dangerous cities in the nation?
It is. We have an intolerable amount of violent crime, and that's why there's no higher priority for us in our office.
Well, there's no higher priority except for pipelines, except for bus routes, except for bank loans, except for implicit bias, except for the fact that everyone is prejudiced. All of those other things are what you're focused on talking about instead of actually locking up bad guys who are murdering and raping and hurting people.
In those same comments, Senator, I said that we don't apologize for seeking significant prison sentences, and that's at the core of what we do. When we have serious violent crime, we seek serious sentences and consequences.
Thank you.
I'm quite confused about this ethics issue or issues, so maybe you can just help me sort it out. So I don't think I maybe understand the facts here. So you said that you've never been subject to an ethics complaint before. Is that right?
I said, to my knowledge, never been subject to an OPR complaint or any sort of formal complaint.
Okay. I'm looking at a letter from May 16th, 2010 to the Office of Professional Responsibility that reads, "This letter is a formal request that your office investigate matters pertaining to the fair dealing and, more important, honesty of Assistant United States Attorney Kevin Ritz."
If that letter exists, Senator, I was unaware of it until just now.
But you're aware of the issues surrounding the Von Rico Weber case, which is the subject of this letter asking for a formal investigation into you. You're aware of that?
As I said, I do have some recollection of that matter.
Oh, okay. So you were subject to a complaint. I have the letter right here. Let's just try to figure out what's going on in this case. I mean, this is a case involving a public defender who you got a plea agreement with, and then she asked to withdraw as counsel because she said he misrepresented the situation to her, and the court granted her motion to withdraw as counsel. That's pretty unusual, isn't it? I mean, what's happening here? She said that you told her that she relied on information about the nature of the crime, which was, she was told, was going to be a marijuana trafficking offense. And then when she got the PSR, it had a base offense level of 34 because the underlying offense was cocaine trafficking. So she had advised her client, based on your representations, here's what you're going to be likely subject to. They accepted the plea deal. She looks at the PSR, and it's something very different, she says, than what you told her. Now, this is a public defender now. And so on that basis, she had to withdraw as counsel, and the court granted her request. Very unusual. I mean, what happened here?
Senator, first of all, I believe it was not a public defender. It was a defense attorney on the CJA panel in West Tennessee. There was a written plea agreement that was entered into. That written plea agreement, as with all of our plea agreements, includes a provision that says these are all of the promises made to this defendant by the government.
Yeah, but then neither the indictment, nor the change of plea transcript, nor that agreement says anything about the underlying crime. It just says funds were the proceeds of distributing controlled substances without any specification of the alleged illegal narcotics. So what she says is, you sandbagged her, basically.
And that's not true. I made no such promise along those lines.
But was there any indication before the PSR that you were going to hit this guy with cocaine? I mean, this is unusual. It's unusual to be a Democrat administration nominate somebody who is accused of, who's hated by federal public defenders, and who's accused of sandbagging indigent defendants. So I'm baffled by this. I'm truly, I am totally baffled by this. So I'm trying to figure out what in the world happened. And then you got taken off this case, I think, right?
My recollection, Senator, is that the office had someone else handle it in case I needed to be a witness.
Well, here's what Vivian Donaldson, who is the counsel who ended up representing the United States, at Ms. Chastain's motion to withdraw as counsel, here's what she said. These allegations about you are serious. That's one of the reasons I am here, meaning in court, and Mr. Ritz will more than likely be taken off this case because of these particular allegations. So did that happen?
And I believe it was in case I needed to be a witness. But
well,
those allegations...
This is what your supervisor said in open court. I'm not quoting you now, private letter. I'm quoting you something from open court. She says you were removed from the case because of the allegations, which she says were very serious. Now, you've represented this committee. You knew nothing about all this. You answered a question in the committee questionnaire that you weren't aware of any complaints. You weren't aware of any disciplinary committee. You weren't aware of any inquiry ever. But yet, I'm reading you a transcript from open court in which your supervising attorney says the allegations against you are very serious. You're going to be removed. So I have to tell you, I'm trying to figure out what the world is going on here. Because it doesn't sound to me like you've been very forthcoming, certainly to this committee. So what happened? Were you removed because of the allegations of improper behavior?
The allegations were false, first of all.
I'm not asking you about your view. I'm asking you about what you told the court and about what your supervising attorney told the court.
And I don't recall exactly why there may have been a change in counsel.
Mr. Ritz, don't you think you'd want to, don't you think that's kind of important information?
These allegations were false. And there was never
you have a clear memory of that, but you don't have a clear memory of what happened in open court and you being potentially removed by your supervising attorney. This is very bizarre, I have to say. I've never seen it quite like this. This is very, very strange. And I just noticed that we have a sudden instance of amnesia anytime we're dealing with the actual ethical complaint, that you seem to remember the case exceptionally well. So this troubles me, and it's strange. It's very, very strange. Maybe my Democrat colleagues can clear this up. I'm sure they've vetted you. This is very, very odd. So your testimony is you weren't removed. All of this was false. You were never investigated, and this just all went away? Or
there was certainly no court finding or any other finding by an investigative body of any unethical behavior.
I thought the court allowed this defendant to change his guilty plea. He pled guilty, and then the court allowed him to withdraw it. That's also very unusual.
It does happen from time to time, Senator.
On the basis of your misrepresentation.
That was not the finding of the court.
Authorizing UAV ECM mission. Gray authorizing UAV mission.
Want to keep your hairline where it is? Through Hims.com, you can explore a range of options that work best for you, so you can grow visibly thicker.
Judge Lopez, I'm going to quickly note there's a reason the Democrats have scheduled you on this panel, because you have a long pattern of sentencing criminal defendants to egregiously light sentences, including one child molester who molested a 4-year-old and 9-year-old. You sentenced him to only 6 years in prison, including, as we heard before, one woman who was responsible for killing her 1-year-old son, who was coated in fentanyl. His pajamas were coated in fentanyl. His sheets were coated in fentanyl. You could have sentenced her to 30 years. You sentenced her to only 4 years. It's an egregious pattern, but the reason you're put on this panel is the Democrats know that most Republicans will not have time to question you about that terrible record, because your colleague on this panel, her record is even worse. Ms. Campbell, I will say I have seen some astonishing nominees from this administration, but I have to admit your record takes the cake.
Bravo zone secure. They're taking C.
A judge should not be a political activist. Your record demonstrates to me a long history of being a political activist, but not just an activist who affiliates with extreme and radical organizations. Now, when Senator Grassley asked you about the Workers' Dignity Organization, you gave, I think, deliberately misleading answer. You said you did not represent them, and that convinced Senator Grassley not to continue on that line of questioning. You have been a legal advisor to that organization since 2013. That is what you have publicly printed on your AVO biography. It is what has been described in the Tennessee Bar Association when you were nominated. That explicitly says she served as a legal advisor for local workers' rights nonprofit Workers' Dignity. Now, why is it you're distancing yourself from them? The reason is because they are utterly radical. You look at this group that you've served as a legal advisor for over a decade. This is an openly Marxist organization. This is a communist organization. Now, those words are not said lightly. According to their own characterization of their views, this group says there's no election outcome that improves conditions for workers. The laws of this country have never worked for our people, and now that the system is crumbling, we will continue to stand in community and solidarity with each other. The only way we win in a world we deserve is by building a multiracial working class revolution that can push out white nationalism, violent state racism, and the capitalist class that is desperately clutching to hold control and profits as the people rise up. Why have you spent a decade as a legal advisor to an openly communist and Marxist organization? I don't think your microphone's on.
I apologize, Senator. If I could briefly clarify, more than a decade ago, probably for the course of 2 or 3 years, I served on an advisory board that helped this, at the time, was supposed to be a non-profit workers' rights organization get set up and get started.
Did you know they were a communist organization?
Senator, at that time, they did not express these kinds of views. It was an organization...
So this is new. This wasn't the case then?
Yes, and I have not been affiliated with them in more than a decade.
You're aware that your current profile that you have up, your legal bio, says you are right now an advisor to them?
I apologize for any confusion about that.
So your testimony under oath, and that's all right, the facts will come out, but your testimony I want to make it explicit. Your testimony under oath is that you have done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long?
I have not served on their advisory board for...
You've done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long? Please answer the question.
Many, many years.
How many?
I don't know, sitting here today. It's been...
Okay, you look at other statements from this organization, because they are radicals. They are radicals. If you look also, this is the same group in 2020. They called for abolishing ICE, abolishing prisons and detention centers, and abolishing the police. Why did you volunteer for a communist organization that calls for abolishing ICE and abolishing the police?
Senator, I have never seen these comments before.
You didn't know who you were volunteering for?
I was not a volunteer for them at that
You were a legal advisor. Were you paid?
No, I was...
Then you were a volunteer. If you volunteered to be a legal advisor, you were a volunteer. Why did you volunteer? Do you support abolishing ICE?
Senator, at this time, I had...
Do you support abolishing ICE?
I do not, Senator.
Well, it's amazing because a minute ago you also told Senator Graham that the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition that has a manifesto calling for abolishing ICE, you said you had nothing to do with it, which is fairly astonishing because on page 3 of their manifesto, they thank you by name for what they say. We would like to thank the following individuals and organizations for their thoughtful feedback and input. This platform would not have been possible without their expertise. Are they lying?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that manifesto.
Are they lying? Did you provide any assistance? Did you give feedback and input, which is what they say on the cover page?
Senator, I didn't even know that existed, and so no, I did not provide input on it.
And why, when Senator Graham asked why you gave money to this radical candidate who has said 52 senators are Jim Crow senators and said multiple of us are siding with the devil, you laughed and thought that was funny. But Senator Graham asked you a question. Look, that candidate was as radical as I've ever seen. And when Senator Graham asked why you gave money to that candidate, you just smiled and didn't answer. So why did you give money to a radical candidate who believes multiple members of the Senate are siding with the devil?
Senator...
Actually, Senator Whitehouse, you weren't here before, but there was an exchange with the chairman where Senator Kennedy asked for longer periods because you have 2 circuit justices, and the chairman said he was going to give additional time. So the comment they want to be gabbled as part of the show is not accurate, and Senator Welch said he was going to give additional time. In fact, he said at the beginning he was going to give 6 minutes. So, my question, you did not answer Senator Graham.
Mr. Chairman, how much time has expired? How much time has expired? I just want to clarify. I just walked in.
Why did you give money?
6 minutes? Because it seems like more than 6 has passed.
Why did you give money to this radical? Put up the devil one too. Why did you give money to this radical candidate? $1,500, a lot of money. That's a question.
Senator, again, I'm not familiar with these comments.
Why did you give money to this radical candidate?
Okay.
What? Could you let her answer the question, please?
I'm not familiar with these comments, and
Why did you give money to her? That's the question. You're not going to answer? You're refusing to answer why you gave money to her.
Senator, I'm not familiar with these...
That's not an answer. My answer is, why did you? What is the affirmative reason? You gave $1,500. There was something you saw in her that you said, this needs $1,500. Why? Please answer that question. Time is expired. Would you please ask the witness to answer the question? She's refusing to answer it. It's indefensible, but answer. Was there any reason? Or do you just give $1,500 to anyone?
Senator, your time is expired.
I would like her to answer the question. And you said she could answer the question. She has refused to do so multiple times. Please answer the question.
She answered the question.
No, she did not. She said she didn't know those comments. That's not why she gave the money.
Senator...
Can I ask you why she gave the money? No. You don't know because she hasn't answered. Are you going to answer, Ms. Campbell, or does this committee not deserve to know why you gave money to a radical who says we are aligned?
Mr. Chairman, I have a lot of other senators of busy days. Get on with the next person.
So you don't want an answer to the question either, Senator Booker?
I just want to say for the record...
question, Ms. Campbell, or do you believe this committee doesn't deserve an answer to that question?
Mr. Chairman, who has the floor?
You're just refusing to answer.
Who's next?
The senator's time has expired. The senator doesn't like the answer.
It's not an answer. She sat there silently and has not spoken. That is, by definition, not an answer.
Senator from...
But at this point, I recognize Senator Cruz.
Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas.
Good morning.
Is there a crisis at our southern border?
Senator, there is a very...
That's a yes or no question.
There's a very significant...
Is there a crisis?
Senator, there's a very significant challenge...
I think your microphone is not on.
There is a very significant challenge that we are facing.
Yes or no, is there a crisis?
I believe I've addressed that question.
So you're refusing to answer?
Senator, there is a very significant challenge. And
will you answer if there's a crisis?
Therefore, we are dedicating the resources...
Okay, so you're refusing to answer. Well, Secretary Mayorkas, I'll tell you someone who is willing to answer, which is your and President Biden's chief of the Border Patrol in a sworn deposition in July of 2022 when asked, would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that the southern border is currently in crisis? Answer, yes. Notice none of those wiggle words, none of that equivocation. One word, one syllable, yes. Are you willing to speak with the same clarity as Chief Ortiz? Is there a crisis at our southern border, yes or no?
Senator, I'm very proud to work alongside...
So you refuse to answer. Let me ask you the next question. Has the crisis at our southern border made Americans less safe, yes or no?
Senator, we are dedicated to the safety...
Has the crisis made Americans less safe? I don't want a discourse. It's a yes or no question.
Senator, we have a challenge...
You refuse to answer the question.
Mr.
Secretary, let me show you how someone doing his job answers a question in a straightforward manner. Chief Ortiz, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at the southern border making the border less safe for Americans and aliens alike? Answer, yes. One word, one syllable, 3 letters. That's how someone answers a question and does their job. You're being a politician misleading the American people. Let me give you a chance again. Will you show the same integrity Chief Ortiz shows? Is the crisis at the southern border making Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we have 260,000...
You refuse to answer the question. Let's move on.
Security of the
Next question, Mr. Mayorkas. Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are seeking...
So you won't answer that question either.
If you...
It's a yes or no. Has it made aliens less safe?
Senator, smugglers are exploiting...
Has the crisis made aliens, yes, less safe? Are you willing to answer it?
Senator, the smuggling organizations...
Okay, you're filibustering again. Let me ask you this question. How many migrants have died under President Biden?
Senator, your phrasing of the question is actually quite misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to...
So do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who've drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died. What do you say to the Texas farmers and ranchers who find pregnant ladies dead on their property, who find toddlers dead on their property? What do you say to them?
I say that is why, precisely, we are taking it to the smuggling organization.
But you are not. That is simply not true.
Number two, it is
let me read from the Wall Street Journal.
Taking B.
The Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago ran an article entitled, "It's like a graveyard. Record numbers of migrants are dying at the border." The story begins with this chilling line, quote, Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officials keep a refrigerated truck to hold the bodies of migrants who drown in the currents of the Rio Grande while trying to cross the border into the U.S. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered to the record. Let me ask you a different question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under the Biden administration?
Senator, this is precisely why...
I don't want to lecture. It's a question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under your administration?
Senator, this is exactly why on January 5th, do you
know how many? Do you know how many children have been sexually assaulted?
This is why we...
Okay, you're going to refuse to answer that question as well. Let's move on. It's obvious you've been instructed to stonewall, so I'm not going to let you. You don't get to stonewall and filibuster. Now, one of my Democratic colleagues before said the Democrat talking point, quote, "This problem didn't start under Biden." Look, I get if you're a partisan spinner, you got to figure out something to say about the absolute catastrophe that has played out under the Biden administration. True or false, Secretary Mayorkas, 2020 was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Is that true or false?
Securing C.
It is certainly the lowest level of immigration in many, many years. What was it in 2020? What was it, Senator, in 2020 that impacted the entire world, including the United States?
Okay, so your testimony is the reason we had the lowest rate was COVID. It had nothing to do with building the wall, nothing to do with any catch and release, nothing to do with remain in Mexico. With all respect, Mr. Secretary, that answer is laughable. And in fact, if you look at illegal immigration, let's look at CBP encounters. You can see 500,000, 500,000, it drops to the lowest level, and boom, what happens? You show up. And that red line is you. That red line is Joe Biden. And you're claiming nothing happened. Oh, gosh, this was here before us. No, you made the decision to allow this to happen. Let me ask you, we now have over 5.5 million people who've entered this country illegally under Joe Biden.
Today, we're doing the Pure Bars versus Nick Sticks challenge. After being submerged for 30 minutes, the Nick Sticks...
Let me ask you, we now have over 5.5 million people who've entered this country illegally under Joe Biden. How many murderers have you released into America?
Senator, I'm not aware of any murderer whom we've...
So you don't know?
Senator, let me say something.
Do you know?
If you take a look at...
No, you don't get to give a speech. Do you know how many murderers you've released?
I'm just trying to answer your question.
How many rapists
Senator,
have you released?
Senator, I'm trying
to... Do you know?
You
can answer, I know or I don't know.
Senator, any individual who poses a public safety threat...
How many child molesters have you released?
...and removed into the United States, from the United States.
Oh, so your testimony under oath, subject to perjury, is that you have not released any murderers, rapists, or child molesters among the 5.5 million. Is that your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, may I have the opportunity?
No, you may not. You may answer my question.
You're not.
Is that your testimony, yes or no?
Senator, you're not allowing me to answer your question.
I am allowing you to answer. I'm not allowing you to filibuster.
If you take a look at the pace of immigration in 2018 to 2019...
You're refusing to answer. Let's move on. Let's move on to gotaways. Gotaways are the people that get away that you...